Good morning. I'm Ken Fisher of Atigro. Welcome to our virtual coffee series, Leaders Adapt to the New Normal. Today we focus on programs and increased funding from the SBA for businesses impacted by COVID-19. Rod Johnson's our favorite SBA loan officer, and he will be with us talking about these and answering all your questions about SBA programs.
Yes.
Our strategic part, okay, let me just start screen sharing. Originally, we planned this to cover Paycheck Protection, EIDL loans, and the Shuttered venue operations grant program. There's also a new program Rod's going to be talking about, so he's very excited about it. I want to thank our partner sponsors and our community sponsors. They make this possible by helping to outreach businesses in the area. Community sponsors. Also, in January, Clark Taylor joined Atigro as our Chief Digital Officer, and he has been the lead SEO for all the sites you see here. Also recently has received this rather nice testimonial from Instagram for growing their traffic by 200%. If you know of anyone who'd like a roadmap to SEO success, we're offering that as an initial light engagement to get to know Clark and his team here at Atigro. And it will give you what you need to know to make SEO a significant contributor to your brand awareness and your sales through digital marketing. Also, keep an eye out for our post coming up on Google's new June algorithm update. That's going to be a game changer for a lot of businesses and organizations, because the focus now will be for this new update on how quickly your site performs. So that will actually involve quite a bit of technical work for a lot of companies to perform up to Google's new standards. Okay, next we have Rod Johnson, loan officer at SBA. And Rod, I understand you have this restaurant program that is the hottest thing since sliced bread, since I guess bagels and cream cheese served at a restaurant. But
well, yes. Well, thank you, Ken. And good morning, everyone. My name is Rod Johnson. I'm the Lender Relations Small Business Development Center Project Officer out of the Washington Metropolitan District Office. I actually cover Montgomery and Prince George's County in Maryland, Northern Virginia, and Washington, D.C. Typically in the district office, what we do is actually push out the policy to the owners, business owners, and to our resource partners like the Women's Business Center, the Small Business Development Centers, the Veteran Business Opportunity Centers, and SCORE. And so a lot of times that's where the information from the SBA gets pushed out to, so that they can actually assist you, the business owner. Now, this morning, I will cover portions of the PPP and where we stand, the EIDL, because there's been some changes to EIDL, and I'm sure you guys have heard about the increase that EIDL has gone up from 150 to 500,000. And then the biggest thing, and what we've been hearing from business owners about, is the restaurant and hotel revitalization fund, as well as the Shuttered venue operations grant. Okay, so first let's start with PPP, because I think people really want to know what's going on with PPP. So here's the latest. As you know, PPP has now been extended until May 31st. Now here's what's key about this May 31st date. Actually, that is the last date that banks will be taking applications. Frankly, some banks have already shut down their portal because they've received so many first and second draw requests that it's just been overwhelming. Now I'm gonna give you the name of two banks that actually are still accepting first and second draw PPP applications, and that is Founders Bank and the other bank is National Capital Bank in Washington, D.C. Those are the two banks that I know of that are still accepting applications, and you don't have to be a customer of those banks. Now, just remember, with the first draw, you have to use all of the first draw money before you can apply for the second draw. Now, getting the first draw now is going to be tough because I don't know if you'll be able to get a first draw and use all the money and get a second draw in time, by May 31st. A, because the banks have a lot of loans to process, and then B, we only have 45 days. I think it's about 45 days left to actually apply, and the money may run out because remember, we started out with 284 billion, then it was raised to another 7 billion, and now it's down to 50 billion, okay? So the funds are going fast, and so I would encourage you, if you haven't applied for either one, to hurry up and apply, okay? Now, the Shuttered Venue Opportunity Grant. Go ahead, other questions?
Yes, could you address the timeline for applying for forgiveness as well, particularly for a second round?
Oh, well, the forgiveness is no different than the first round. You still have an 8 or 24-week covered period. I'm not sure why anybody would take an 8-week covered period, but you have a 24-week covered period, right, to use the money. And then let's make sure that you're keeping the documentation. So let's review actually what the money can be used for, right? It's 60-40. So a minimum of 60% has to be used toward payroll and 40% toward business expenses. Now, if you're a single member LLC, a 1099, or a sole proprietorship, just understand that you can use 100% of the PPP money to pay yourself. Now, in that instance, what you would do is put the PPP money in another account, write a check off of that account. On the bottom of the check in the left-hand side memo section, you would put payroll self. You would deposit that into your personal checking account, all right? And so now you have the documentation. You have the bank statement from which you wrote the check off of. You have the bank statement where you deposited that check, and then you actually have the canceled check. So then when it becomes time to go for forgiveness, then, that one's an easy one. Then you can get 100% forgiveness because you've used 100% of the funds to pay yourself. Now, what are the eligible expenses, right? Gas, and remember, it's for business gas, water, electric, business cell phone, business landline phone, PPE. If there's any damage to your property due to the unrest, whatever the insurance company doesn't cover, you can use money toward that. You can use money if you have the money to restock your inventory. You can use the money to actually get QuickBooks if you don't have QuickBooks, or CRM software. And so those are actually the uses for the money. And of course, cable, right? Of course, the internet and cable. So now you must be able to have a copy of the invoice, the canceled check, the bank statements that actually show how the money was used. So documentation is very important for the forgiveness process. Now, you will fill out the application, and keep in mind there are 3 forms. There's the 3506, yeah, I think it's 3508, excuse me. 3508 short form is for loans of 150,000 and below. It's a 1-page application, okay, just a 1-page application. Page 2 and 3, excuse me, pages 2 and 3 are actually instructions on how to complete the application, okay? That goes up to 150,000. From 151,000 up to 2 million, you have the 3508 EZ form, okay? And so remember, you must actually have all the documentation to support how you use the money. And then you have 2 million up to 10 million. That's the third form. I call it the long form. It's a 3508 long form. Now, anything that you want to know about PPP and the forms, whether it's the forgiveness forms, the legislation, the frequently asked questions, all of that is on sba.gov/PPP. Everything is out there, and everything you need to know about PPP is there. Right now, as I said, the issue is finding a financial institution that is still accepting applications, because the banks have been inundated with applications. All right, now, for round two or draw two, there have been some issues with the second draw because the SBA is trying to catch fraud up front. So a lot of times things are being flagged early. So one of the things you want to do is make sure that your EIN number is the same as the EIN number that you apply for the first round of PPP. Because for whatever reason, business owners are, putting the last number as the wrong number or the last two numbers, and so it shuts it down. All right, the system no longer will shut down if you are delinquent on your student loans, okay, or if you defaulted on a student loan. Because generally, if you have one of those two occurrences, then it shuts the process down and you're ineligible for SBA funds. The other thing is the system would shut down for non-felony convictions. Well, now that's been taken care of. So if it's a non-financial felony conviction, then your application will continue to be processed. Now, there's still other reasons why your loan may get held up in processing. Don't call the district office because there's nothing we can do about that. You work with your banker and you tell your banker that the procedural notices have been sent to every bank on how to remove any holes that come up during the processing process. And they are to work with their processing center. On the East Coast, I think it's in Arizona. Yeah, it's in Arizona where they work with the processing center to remove any holes. So the district office has no jurisdiction over that. You have to work with, you do have to work with the district, with the processing center, and that's the bank, okay? So that's really what I have for PPP at this time. Are there any other questions?
There's a comment that apparently someone got a PPP loan through PayPal, and that a lot of people don't know PayPal is accepting.
Okay, so you have PayPal, you have all the, I'll call them the internet banks that are, or I should say were or are, processing first and second draw PPP loans. But again, some of those have already shut down because of just the sheer volume of the applications that they have received, okay? So you'll just have to, I guess, go out individually to those sites like Cabbage, On Deck, PayPal, and see if they're still accepting applications. But like I said, I know that Founders Bank and National Capital Bank are still accepting applications, and they're not requiring you to be customers of the bank, which I think is huge.
That's very big, yes.
Okay.
The initial was you weren't a customer, you were out of luck.
Yes, that's exactly right. Okay. Now, let's go over to EIDL, because there were a lot of people that were really excited to hear about EIDL raising the cap from $150,000 up to $500,000. Actually excited me also. And just to get ahead of myself a little bit, there is talk that they may raise the amount back up to the original amount to $2 million. If you may recall, actually, it was the EIDL program that was the first program that was rolled out during this pandemic. It wasn't PPP, it was actually EIDL. And EIDL went up to $2 million, and it didn't have the restrictions that the PPP has on it, where you have to use 60% for payroll and 40% for business expenses, okay? Now with EIDL, for the business expenses that I mentioned under PPP, you can use the idle funds for those same type of expenses, and you can use a portion of idle for payroll. But again, the thing I like about idle is that they're not putting that 60-40 restriction. They're leaving it up to you as to how you want to use those funds. Now, if you've already received an idle loan, you can request an increase. Now, there's information out there that the SBA will contact you if you already have an idle loan. And that is true. But I believe in taking matters into my own hands. So I'm going to give you this email address, okay? And it's all one word. It's COVID idle increase requests with an S at SBA.gov. COVID idle increase request at SBA.gov. Okay, so what you're going to do in the title section is put in your 10-digit idle application number and the word increase. Okay, then in the body of the email, you're going to put in your business name, address, telephone number, and EIN number, and the business owner's name, okay? So that they can quickly pull up your idle, and then what they'll do, your existing idle, and then what they'll do is send you an email of the information that they'll need. Now, just so you know, they're probably gonna want the 2020 business tax returns. So your 1120S, your 1120, your 1065 with the K1s, your 1040 with the Schedule C, okay? That's what they're going to be looking for.
What if you haven't found it yet? A lot of people do extensions, particularly regional last year.
Yeah, well, you know, let me say this, and I say this as a banker, extensions are not good.
Okay.
And one of the things that, you know, for the past 35 years since I've been in the business was I would mention to business owners, you know, in many instances, they would just automatically file for an extension, okay? And I said, well, if you file for that extension, you can't get the financing that you need to grow your business. All right, so now here we are in a pandemic, and if you filed an extension, and look, I understand we are in a pandemic, so you may not have put together all of your information, but it may preclude you from getting the financing that you need. So I would get on it and get my paperwork together, because the other thing is you have to fill out a 4506T form, which means that the IRS will have to, you know, say that they have your document, your tax documents on hand. So it's important that you have your 2019 and your 2018, excuse me, your 2019 and your 2020 tax returns done. Okay, it's really important. Now, also, they're probably going to ask for the first quarter year-to-date balance sheet and income statement through March 31st, 2021. Now, you can pull that out of your QuickBooks statement, out of your QuickBooks system or whatever accounting system you use, and go ahead and send that into them, okay? So that's typically the information that they're going to need to do the increase, because they're going to want to see that, you know, what's happened. Now, there's also the idle advance, but they're trying to do a more targeted advance, okay? So what they're doing, let's say that you applied for the advance and you didn't get funded because, frankly, we ran out of the $20 billion that was appropriated for that. Then the SBA, in this case, will contact you and tell you what they need. Also, if you receive the idle advance, and let's just say they only gave you $3,000, well, now they want every business to have the full $10,000, okay? So what they'll do Because if you got 3, they'll give you the additional $7,000. Now, if you, for some reason, applied for the EIDL advance and you got declined, which I wouldn't understand why you got declined, but if you got declined, here is the email: targeted advance reevaluation at sba.gov. Targeted advance evaluation at sba.gov. All right, in the subject line, you're going to put in, if you've already applied for it, then you're going to put in the 10-digit application number. So I hope you saved it. And then you're going to put in your business name, address, telephone number, and EIN number. And since you received a decline, hopefully you will be able to submit the documentation to overcome the decline, because usually they'll tell you why you were declined for the EIDL advance. Okay, so there you have it: target advance reevaluation at sba.gov. Okay.
Yeah, so a couple questions. Someone has said they already sent in the request, but they didn't send in their tax return. It hasn't been requested, but should they go ahead and send it now along with the 4506T and first quarter numbers?
Yep, that was certainly yes. Short answer, yes.
And then, are there funds available for faith-based entities?
Oh yes, yes. Faith-based entities can apply for EIDL. They've always been approved.
Okay. And
yes.
Then, what is the expected turnaround, and is there like a sunset like there is with PPP here?
All right, you go through December 31st for EIDL. The turnaround, I can't give you a turnaround time because there are too many. The last count that I had heard, there were like 9 million applications for EIDL funds.
Yeah.
Okay, so I can't give you a turnaround time. They're overwhelmed.
9 million times 500,000 is a lot.
Okay, I mean, they're really overwhelmed there. Mm-hmm. And frankly, between EIDL, the Restaurant Rescue Fund, and the Shuttered Venue Grant, and we're the one at the SBA ourselves. This is not being parceled out to banks. We're the one running these 3 funds. If you recall, the increase to EIDL, the SVOG, and the RRF, all of those were supposed to open on April 8th. Okay, and as you see, here we are. What's today? April 21st, and I think we're going to actually be able to open the portals for the SVOG program and RRF early next week. So we've just been inundated with so many applications for EIDL, and frankly, for SVOG and the RRF, I mean, it's just going to be a madhouse in the Office of Disaster Assistance.
And EIDL stands for Emergency Impact Disaster Loan? Someone's asking.
Economic Injury Disaster Loan.
Okay, sorry, my fault. Economic disinjury. Okay.
Injury Disaster Loan, yes.
Disaster. And so when you said EIDL in the emails, it's EIDL.
Yes, EIDL, yes.
And then someone's asking that they're so proprietary. How much EIDL advances am I eligible for? I received $1,000 in 2020.
All right, so remember, now they're going to, since you, with the EIDL loan or EIDL advance? EIDL advance?
Yeah, they're asking about the advance.
Yeah, okay, good, yeah. So actually you should get $9,000 because you only got $1,000 previously. So now they're gonna make you whole and give you the additional $9,000.
But as I remember, there's also, if you receive PPP, that gets subtracted from EIDL, or the EIDL advance rather, or?
All right, so Congress actually fixed that loophole because when it came to the forgiveness process, if let's just use the example, you got $100,000 PPP, but prior to that $100,000 PPP, you got a $10,000 EIDL advance. Well, that EIDL advance didn't get subtracted from the PPP. So what it did was it left you with a $10,000 loan with the bank after the other 90,000 was forgiven. Well, Congress fixed that loophole with the bill that President Biden had signed, that the SBA will issue a credit to the bank and wipe out, let's just say, that $10,000 so that you don't have to worry about that.
I see. And is the EIDL advance process application different than the EIDL loan application process? Different application?
Well, really, the EIDL advance, the EIDL advance, and let me say this. So now the EIDL advance is being targeted to low to moderate income areas. Mm-hmm. So you would go to sba.gov/EIDL, and there's a map, and you would click on the map to see and put in your zip code to see if you're in a low to moderate income area, to see if you would qualify or be one of the top recipients for the EIDL advance.
Okay, but that's a separate application than the EIDL.
Yes, loan. Yes. And it's the same information, name, address, telephone number. But you better hurry, they may have closed that down.
Okay. So
the money, all of this money is just going very quickly because obviously there's a demand for it. So it's going fast.
So the EIDL advance may close down, but the EIDL loan will be available.
Open through December 31st.
December 31st. Okay, great.
And frankly, under the bill that President Biden signed into law, they actually gave an additional $20 billion worth of funding for the EIDL advance. But just remember that now the SBA is going back to those people that received it first or applied for it and got declined, and they're making those people whole first, okay? So we don't know how much of that 20 billion will actually go to new applications. It may all be used up by the people that had already applied and are now going to be brought up to the $10,000, maximum.
I see. And how about money left for the actual loans? Is that limited? Because 9 million times 500,000 is a pretty big number.
I don't remember. I don't remember the funding for the EIDL loan. Mm-hmm. I just don't, because actually most of the questions have been on the PPP funding because people have really wanted to keep track of the PPP funding. Mm-hmm. So that's the number I've been actually keeping track of, mm-hmm. versus EIDL.
Okay, great.
I'm just excited that they raised the EIDL amount from 150 to 500. And I hope, and I saw this morning, because we get briefings every morning, and I saw that Congress is considering moving it back up to 2 million. So I hope they really do that for EIDL.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all the questions we have on EIDL so far.
All right, so now the SVOG. Now,
do you want to use your slide deck, by the way, or?
Not yet, not yet.
Okay. Sorry.
So the SVOG. So you want to know what expenses are covered. And I'll go over the program. But most people, for the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, they want to know, how do I use this money? Okay, that's really what they want to know because they're hurting. All right, so payroll costs, rent payments, utilities, okay, scheduled mortgage payments, scheduled debt payments, okay, not including prepayment of principal or any indebtedness, right? All right, worker protection expenditures, right? The PPP stuff, the face mask, having people tested. Payments to independent contractors not to exceed $100,000 in annual compensation per contract. Administrative costs, state and local taxes can be used. The money can be used for state and local taxes. Operating leases, and here's the key, operating leases in effect as of February 15th, 2020. Insurance payment, advertising, production, transportation, okay, and expenses related to producing theatrical or live performing arts productions. Okay, now you may not use the funds to buy real estate. Okay, because just like people use PPP to buy real estate, which was not a use of the funds, it's the same with the SVOG. You cannot use the money to buy real estate. Okay, you cannot make payments on loans originated after February 15th. You cannot make investments with the money, because even with PPP, we had people going out playing the stock market. That was not a use of the right use of funds for PPP, and it's not the right use of funds for the SVOG. Okay.
Rod, February 15th of which year?
2020.
Okay.
2020.
So we just passed to February 15th. I just want to make sure.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay. You can't make contributions to political parties, political committees, or candidates for elections. We had people use PPP for that. No, you can't use it for SVOG either. Okay. So now, just like PPP, you have to keep very good records, okay? Very good records of how you use the money. Now, who's going to get, there's a first, second, and third priority. And this is important. For the first 14 days that the portal is open, and this is key, entities that suffered a 90% or greater revenue loss between April 2020 through December 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic, they get first priority. So you have to have a 90% or greater revenue loss. These dates are important, between April 2020 through December 2020, okay? So they get first priority. And there are a lot of venues out there that did suffer a 90% or greater. All right, then there's going to be a second priority. Entities that suffered a 70% or greater loss. Same time, April 2020 through December 2020, okay? So they'll have 14 days, the next 14 days. So there'll be day 15, right, through, what's that, day 15 through day 29, okay? And then the third priority, okay, beginning 28 days after the first and second priorities are made, awards are made, entities that suffered a 25% or greater earned revenue loss between one quarter of 2019 and the corresponding quarter of 2020. So in that instance, you would choose, let's just say, for example, September 30th, 2019 versus September 30th, 2020, you would need to show a 25% or greater loss in revenue, okay? So hopefully you got these dates down. I'll go over it again. 90% or greater loss between April 2020 and December 2020, okay? They get the first 14 days. The next 14 days, 70% or greater revenue loss between April 2020 and December 2020, okay? And then the third priority, which is a 25% or greater earned revenue loss between the quarter of 2019 and the corresponding quarter for 2020. So you get to choose whether that's March 31st, June 30, September 30, okay? The corresponding quarter between 2019 and 2020, okay? So that's in order how the money is going to be distributed, okay?
So Rod, you said the people who lost 90% of the revenue will be prioritized, but are there other people eligible as well?
Well, remember, this is just for the shuttered venue.
Right. Just for the shuttered venue, is it strictly you must have that revenue loss in those dates, or
yes?
If you have 80%, you can apply, but you'll be second tier.
You'll
Okay.
be second tier.
It'd be second tier. So it is possible to still get the money, but you don't think it's likely, or?
Well, when the program opens, honestly, this program is going to go fast, but the money's going to go fast, but they're strict on the 90, 70, 25 in terms of priority.
Okay. Okay. So not likely if you don't match that.
Right.
Okay. Great.
All right. So because if people want to know the entities, okay, and I'm sure they do, but they should know who they are already. Okay. Live venue operator or promoters, theatrical producers, live performing arts organization operators, museum operators, zoos, aquariums, motion picture theater operators, talent representatives. Okay. So those are who are eligible. You must have been in operation as of February 29th, 2020. Okay. A venue or promoter who received a PPP loan on or after December 27, 2020 will have the SVOG reduced by the PPP loan amount. Okay. So just like EIDL, if you had an EIDL advance and you had a PPP, then you would have that EIDL advance deducted. So if you received a PPP loan on or after December 27th, 2020, then the PPP will be reduced from that SVOG loan amount. Okay. So just know that. So that's really your SVOG program. And like I said, I'm hoping that it will actually be open next week, along with the Restaurant Rescue Fund. All right, so now we can talk about the Restaurant Rescue Fund. So now we can go to the slides. So Ken, if you can move it to the next slide.
Sure. Let me just screen share again. Hold on, all my Zoom windows have been moved around. Let's see.
And while you're doing that, that's fine. I can talk. So,
sure.
All right. So what is, I call it the RRF, which stands for Restaurant Revitalization Fund. Okay. So as you may have heard, and it's slide number 2.
Mm-hmm.
As you may have heard, it's 28.6 billion. Okay. That's been appropriated for this program. And the money will be there until it's expended. And I'm glad that third bullet is there because I really think the money is really going to go fast. Okay. The funds must be used for eligible uses no later than March 11th, 2023. So you have a very long runway to actually use, this money. So next slide, please. So you want to know who's eligible. Okay. Restaurants, food stands, food trucks, food carts, caterers, bars, saloons, lounges, taverns, bakeries, snack and non-alcoholic beverage bars, like our favorite Starbucks. Okay, I think Ken likes Starbucks, but our favorite coffee shops, right? Our ice cream shops, our brew pubs and tasting room and tap rooms. Oh my gosh, breweries and microbreweries, wineries, distilleries, inns, right? And I better say on-site sales of food and beverage to the public, where 33% of their revenue is derived from that, right? Food and beverage. And other similar places of business, okay? So there are a lot of entities that actually are eligible for this money. Next slide, please. So SBA will provide up to 5 million per location, not to exceed 10 million total for the applicant and any affiliated business. Okay. And the minimum award is $1,000. Now, I don't know how much $1,000 is going to do, but that's the minimum award is $1,000. Okay. Now, next slide. Now, the good thing is the applicant does not need to, just for the SVOG, you have to register in sam.gov before the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. You don't have to register in sam.gov, and you do not, and the SBA will not require a DUNS or a CAGE identifier. Here's a biggie. Valid unexpired I-10s are acceptable. The operative word there is unexpired, because we've run into expired I-10s for PPP, and people have applied for renewals, but the IRS, as you know, people are working remotely, so those renewals are slow coming, okay, for those I-10s. Okay. And all you have to do is go to the I-10 expiration FAQs at irs.gov. But I can tell you what I just pretty much said is what's going on at the IRS with these I-10s. All right, next slide, please. Because it's been a bane to my existence with those I-10s. All right, entities that are ineligible. A state or local government operated business, okay? As of March 13, 2020, owns or operates together with any affiliated business more than 20 locations, okay? Has a pending application for or has received a shuttered venue operator's grant. So you can't do both, right? You can't have an SVOG and a RRF. Definitely if you're a publicly traded company, you can't, okay? I've gotten the question, well, we're on the NASDAQ. NASDAQ means you're publicly traded, okay? So you can't. All right. You can't be permanently closed. You can't be a nonprofit, okay? I don't know too many nonprofit restaurants, but anyway, you can't be a nonprofit organization. All right. And is not eligible for funding of at least 1,000. Okay, so you got to have that minimum of 1,000 need. All right, go ahead, next slide, please. All right, so who's eligible? C corporations, S corporations, partnerships, limited liability companies, sole proprietorships, self-employed individuals, we know who those are, independent contractors, tribal businesses, LLCs taxed as S corporations or sole proprietorships. Now, I did get a question about B Corps, and this is the one that we have pushed back on. So B Corps are eligible, but they will select either C Corp or S Corp on the application, depending on how they're taxed, okay? So just refer to your tax return to see self-employed versus sole proprietorship distinction. All right, next slide, please. Franchises, isn't that great? Any business concern operating as a franchise and meeting all the other criteria actually is eligible. The franchise must be listed on the SBA franchise directory. So you can just go to sba.gov/franchise and see if it's on the directory. Most franchises are on the SBA directory, okay? So if you own a Subway shop or Kentucky Fried Chicken or Burger King or McDonald's or something like that, typically they're on there. Chipotle, I mean, you know, all the names, Starbucks, they're all on there, okay? In the application portal, applicants will be able to look up their entity on the SBA franchise directory, of course. Brands not listed on the directory, including brands that have previously been denied listing on the directory because of affiliation. The franchisor must submit the franchise disclosure document, okay? And all other documents a franchise is required to sign to franchise@sba.gov for review. So if you're not on the SBA list, you have an opportunity to get your franchise. Franchisor has an opportunity to get on the list after the SBA reviews it, but you send the documentation to franchise@sba.gov for review, okay? Next slide, please. All right, so bankruptcy. This was another one. Let me go back to PPP. One of the things that may slow down the processing for PPP is the bankruptcy. So if you file for Chapter 7 bankruptcy for PPP, you're not getting PPP. Now, back to here. If the applicant are operating under approved reorganization plan like a Chapter 11 or 12 or 13 and meet all program requirements, they're eligible for funding. You know, normally, this is a no-no under regular SBA, but since for this program, you're fine, as long as you're under an approved plan, okay? An applicant is not eligible if it has, again, permanently closed. Just like PPP, filed a Chapter 7 liquidation or bankruptcy, or file for either Chapter 7, 11, 12, or 13, right? But it's not under an approved plan. So the key is Chapter 11, 12, or 13, you have to be under an approved plan. I'm almost going to be pretty certain that you're going to have to provide the documentation to show that you're under an approved plan, okay? Permanently closed does not include businesses who temporarily closed their doors due to state or local restrictions, because I know that's going to be a question that comes up. The county required us to close for a couple of months. Are we still eligible? Yes, you're still eligible, okay? And that's important to know. All right, next slide, please. All right, Paycheck Protection Program, how do other reliefs? The question is, you know, how does PPP and all these other things affect this? Any funds already received through the PPP will be subtracted from the final funding amount. Applicant is verified using the EIN, ITIN, or Social Security number associated with PPP. If the applicant received a PPP loan, they must use the same EIN number for its RRF application that it used for PPP. I don't know why you try to use a different number, but okay, that makes sense to me. Upon applying for the RRF, applicant must withdraw any outstanding PPP application. So if you have an application in the works right now with TD Bank and you want to apply for the RRF, you must withdraw the application, right? So if you've been approved and funded, then of course they're going to back out that funded amount of the PPP. But if you have an application that's in the process of being approved, then you need to go to your bank and withdraw that PPP application, okay? The applicant, as it says, the applicant must not have a pending application for or have received a Shuttered Venue Opportunity Operator Grant from SBA, okay? All right, so next slide, please. Attestation. All applicants must certify that current economic uncertainties, and of course, we all know that the pandemic makes the funding request necessary, okay, to support the ongoing operations. Look, that's an easy attestation, right? We know that COVID-19 has hurt just about every business out there. So that's an easy one. All right, next slide, please. All right, so what are the eligible uses of the funds? Because people want to know that, okay? And how much time do we have here, Ken? We got 10 minutes?
Yeah, well, it's up to you. We can go over a bit.
All right, so good. All right, good. We'll go over. All right, so the business expenses, you see it right here. Payroll cost, including sick leave, okay? Think about PPP in your 941. That's really all you need to think about there is the 941 that you submit to the IRS on a quarterly basis. Business utility payments, business maintenance expenses, business supplies, you know, the PPE stuff, right? Business food and beverage, including raw materials, covered supplier costs, business operating expenses, insurance, marketing, fees, licenses, legals, point of sale equipment, all that stuff, okay? Construction of outdoor seating. All right, now you can't use the money for expansion, okay? You can't use it for expansion. All right, business debt, payments on any mortgage obligation, both principal and interest. Now, if you remember under PPP, it was the interest on the mortgage payment, not principal. But for this one, it's both, and I like this, both principal and interest. Now you can't prepay it, okay? It does not include any prepayment of principal and interest. All right, business debt service, both principal and interest, okay? And this does not include any prepayment of principal and interest. So here are your eligible uses for the program, all right? Actually, it's pretty good. All right, next slide, please. Oh yeah, all right, so you have a couple of years. All right, so the funds must be spent on expenses that were or are incurred between, so you can go back in time, right? You can go back to February 15th, and you have through March 11th, 2023 to bring it forward to use the money, okay? If the business permanently closes after receiving the funds, the covered period will end when the business permanently closes, or on March 11th, 2023, whichever occurs first, okay? Now, any funds not spent on eligible expenses by the time the covered period ends must be returned to the government. So I know that you guys are going to use all the money. You're not going to get the money and not use it all, right? So I don't think you want to return any money back to the government after you've waited this long to receive the money that you need to, you know, jumpstart it. All right, next slide, please. Use of funds. After the total awarded funds have been exhausted, as usual, you know, detailed expenditure reports and certification for the required period. Just like PPP, documentation, documentation, documentation. All right, so until applicant completes the use of funds assessment beginning December 2021, applicants are required to provide a self-reported, unaudited data detailing use of distributed funds each year through 2023. So just keep track, just keep good documentation so that each year you can go ahead and provide the unaudited detail, okay, to the SBA. And the SBA will provide additional guidance that outlines detailed reporting requirements and procedures in the coming weeks. Keep the bank statements, your receipt, you know, any invoices, canceled checks, because I already know that's coming. That's what they're going to ask for. So just go ahead and keep that information, okay? All right, next slide, please. Now, here's the one that I'm still working on myself. All right, so how do I calculate my potential fund amount? I think there are like 3 calculations when I read through this thing. And I'm gonna have to read it again. But anyway, here we go. Calculation 1, applicants in operation prior to or on January 1st, 2019. All right, so 2019 gross receipts minus your 2020 gross receipts minus the PPP loan amount. So remember, if you had a PPP, it was going to be reduced anyway, right? So 2019 gross receipts minus 2020 gross receipts minus your PPP loan amount, okay? So that's your first calculation. Calculation, go ahead to the next slide. Calculation 2, applicants that began operations partially through 2019. So let's just say you started October 2019. Well, let's use June. So you're going to say average 2019 monthly gross receipts times 12, right? Minus the 2020 gross receipts minus the PPP loan amount, okay? So the average 2019 monthly gross receipts times 12 minus 2020 gross receipts minus 2020 gross receipts minus PPP loan amounts. Okay, so the applicant that began operations partially in 2019 may choose to use calculation 2 or calculation 3. However, calculation 3 could require longer processing time. All right, so let's look at number 3. All right, so applicants that began operations on or between January 1, 2020 and March 10th, 2021, and applicants not yet open but have incurred eligible expenses as of March 11th, 2021. All right. So, and you know what? You're going to need to keep this as your guide as you're going through this. All right. So the total amount spent on eligible expenses, which I said you could go back to for February 2020 and March 11th, 2021, minus 2020 and 2021 gross receipts minus the PPP loan amounts. Now, applicants that began operations partially in 2019 may choose to use either calculation 2 or calculation 3. However, calculation 3 could require longer processing times. So your SBDCs, your women business centers, SCORE, and your VBOX are all there to help you with these calculations so that you know how much money you're going to get going in. Okay. All right. So what can you exclude? Go to the next slide. What can you exclude from the gross receipts? The Paycheck Protection, the PPP loan, which comes under the first draw or second draw, right? Received in 2020 and or 2011. Section 112 payments. What that means are the payments that were made on your behalf by the SBA for 3 months of principal and interest on your current SBA loans. That's what it means for Section 112 payments. All right, the EIDL loan, the EIDL advance, the targeted EIDL advance, or any other grant funds received from the CARES Act, okay? Well, I just named them. All right, any state and local business grants, and the Randolph-Shepard Act financial relief and restoration payments, appropriation. Anybody know what that is? I don't know what that is. Ken, maybe you can tell me. All right, but basically, any and all grants, loan payments, or loans are subtracted from your 2020 gross receipts, okay? All right, next slide, please. All right, how do I apply? Now you're gonna go directly through the SBA platform, restaurants.sba.gov. Now, the SBA is actively looking for a partner with more POS providers and through the telephone. So you can go to either restaurants.sba.gov or you can call 844-279-8898. Just understand, if you call using the telephone, it's going to take longer to process your loan application. Now, what documents do I need to apply? Next slide, Ken. So, of course, you're going to fill out the SBA, and I've looked at that form, and you got a whole lot of questions you have to answer. But anyway, the SBA form 3172, initialed and signed. It'll be signed digitally. Verification for tax information, 4506T. You've heard me talk about that. Signed by the applicant. Completion of this form digitally on the SBA grant will satisfy this requirement. All right, gross receipts documentation. Now, you can get that from your business tax returns, right? 1120 or 1120S, the IRS 1040 with the Schedule C or Schedule F for the farmers, the partnership 1065, the bank statements. What I like is for the restaurant industry is the point of sale reports, right? Including the IRS form 1099. Now, all restaurants, at least the ones I know about, have point of sale reports, okay? Or you can use externally or internally prepared financial statements, such as an income statement or profit and loss statement. So for you QuickBooks users, you have the opportunity to use your QuickBooks. All right, next slide, please. All right, so we know about the 3172 form, the 2019 gross receipts, they're saying tax returns, 3 months of bank statements, which is easy. You can just pull that down offline. Your 2020 gross receipts, at least one of these, preferred, federal tax returns filed, okay? Again, the point of sale report. Most restaurants have use a point of sale report, okay? This is acceptable, but may delay the review past 14 days. externally or internally prepared statements such as the income statement or profit and loss statement signed and dated. Okay. So really that tax return that I go back to the tax return, that'll help speed up, right? Because they're giving themselves 14 days to look at your application. So if you don't have a tax return and you're using internally or externally prepared financial statement, it will delay the processing, okay? So just know that. Next slide, please. All right, so what's required? Is that calculation 3? Yeah, it's calculation 3. Okay. Of course, the 3172 to 4506 preferred. Here we go. 2020 federal tax returns filed or 2020 federal tax returns prepared but not yet filed. Okay. 2020 point of sales report, 2021 point of sales report. We know the eligible expense documentation, at least one, and required appropriate supporting documentation. Preferred, a CPA comfort letter. Okay. Well, if you don't have a CPA, get one because it's the fastest SBA review if we have that comfort letter from the CPA. Okay. If applicant submits expenses related to the following categories: payroll documents, that 941 I talked about, outdoor seating expenditures, the invoices and payments, business debt, right, which is the lender, with the report that the lender. Now, accepted, but here we go again, delays the review past 14 days, externally or internally prepared financial statements, okay? If the applicant submits expenses related to the following categories: appropriate documentation, payroll, 941, the same thing, outdoor seating and the business debt, those are still all required. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, for applicants that are brew pubs, tasting rooms, tap room, breweries, wineries. Oh man, documents evidencing that on-site sales to the public comprise at least 33%. So basically, guys, just break down your revenues, your total revenue, and just be able to show that 33%, comes from, your food and beverage, okay? Applicants that are an inn, right? You still have to show 33% of your gross receipts come from food and beverage, okay? So just do a breakout of your revenue. All right, next slide. Now, and I'll stop it here. So how do I get help applying? The call center hotline, you see the number 844-279-8898. You can go to the URL sba.gov/local assistance, and it will be available in many languages. But I'm going to tell you now that really it's going to be your local SBDC, Women Business Center, SCORE, okay, and some of the chambers that will actually be able to help you with this, okay? And then, of course, I guess Ken, will you send out the slides?
Yeah, slides and video will be sent out. Hey, Rod, there's a couple questions here remaining. But,
okay.
So one question is about the form. Okay, first, you've avoided the word grant, but are these grants? Yes, the
SBA is saying that we should avoid the word grant. That's why. Yes, okay. They are. They're not loans.
Okay. So,
and they don't want to confuse it with the SVOG, which is a grant.
Right. So Restaurant Revitalization Fund produces not grants, non-grant.
Right.
We clarified that. Thank you. So there's is there a cap on the amount each recipient or applicant can receive?
I haven't seen that there is a cap.
Mm-hmm.
Not yet. I haven't seen there's a cap.
Okay. And then.
Oh, wait a minute. Yes, 10 million. I'm sorry.
10 million. Okay.
10 million. 10 million. Yes, okay. Yes. 10 million.
And then I might ask Mark Foreman to go on audio for this, to unmute himself, because it's complex. But he's asking about the reporting requirements. You will use the SF 425, or will SBA create a new unique form?
You know, I don't know yet. Honestly, I don't know yet.
Okay, because their Transparency Act reporting requirements are unclear, he's saying.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, great. And then there were a couple questions about EIDL, going back to EIDL.
Mm-hmm.
One, I think this is very quick, but if you received X amount last year, you can receive 500,000 minus X this year. Is that the case?
Yes, that's right. There you go. Yeah.
Okay. And so you can receive the balance of 500,000. The other question was that someone,
If, I better say, if
Yeah.
your business shows that it can handle that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one person pointed out that, oh, Mark, thanks you for your openness and honest presentation, which is always the case. That's why we keep inviting you back, Rod. And so the other question is, someone applied through the invitation, the targeted invitation that was sent out, and
Good.
they were asked to fill in their bank numbers, basically revenue per month for the last year through March of this year, 2020 and through March 21. And that was the application, essentially. So that still, you think they're going to be asked for tax returns as well?
Don't be surprised if they do, because remember, they're still, I think they're still asking for a 4506T. Or maybe you had already provided the 4506T, so they don't need it. So all they needed was the month by month breakdown.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. So thanks so much, Rod. This has been great. What we're going to do is, since we didn't advertise this as restaurant revitalization, we're going to put that in the email and put it out on LinkedIn. So please, everyone, help us promote this. When you see it on LinkedIn, please promote it, or please use your own social media accounts to promote this once we post the video and deck. Let the restaurants know about this, because this is really important, hot off the press.
And you know, Ken, and hopefully you guys will have me back. I'll have, let's just say in about 3 weeks, when the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant is actually up and running. And I'm sure there's going to be more fine tuning to the program. And I know there's going to be more fine tuning for the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. So if you have me back, then I can give you the latest and greatest of what's going on with those two funds. And maybe I'll even have an update with EIDL and be able to excitingly say that now the amount has gone up to $2 million.
Oh, okay. But we still won't know what happens to the applications when we put them in.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Oh, you know what, Ken? This is what I'm going to do. For EIDL, actually, there is a, is it an email? I think it's an email address that you can actually email and find out where your application is in the queue.
Oh, great.
Okay. Actually, that just popped up while we were talking. So that's new too. So I'm constantly getting updates. So I'll actually email that to you, what that is, so people can actually sign up.
Great. And if you could email us all those emails for EIDL, we'll just pop them into the slide deck. So we'll make a slide, we'll add a slide, and, you know, because you mentioned 2 other emails, targeted advanced reevaluation.
Yes.
And COVID, EIDL
increased request. Yeah. Okay. Yep. I'll put that in the email to you. Yep.
Appreciate it. So we'll pop that in the deck, or just, you know, if you could just clearly state when what each is used for. That way it won't be confusing to people. They won't email the wrong thing.
Right. That's right.
Thanks so much. Okay. Appreciate it. So thanks so much, Rod. It's great having you as always. Thank you all for coming and participating. I know we had an additional bit of knowledge here added today, which we didn't expect, restaurant revitalization. So please help us get this word out to restaurants. Thanks so much.
Yes. Thank you, Ken.
Have a great day, everyone.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.